Welcome back. In this session we're going to actually have a look at developing timers. So in the project today we're going to actually use a timer to control animation. To see what we're sort of working towards, here is a simple timer. When I hit the start, the timer will engage and the numbers will count up, and when I hit stop, that timer will stop and reset. So I hit start, you see the counting. I hit stop, stops at 106. When I hit start again, it starts at 0 once more and continues through. So that's the project we're going to be working on now. A timer is much the same as a loop. It'll run for a duration, and we can actually control the amount of times at which it actions, also the number of steps in between. We can slow it down or speed it up. So let's have a look at creating this from the start. So once again, I'm going to start again and go to File, and I'm going to start a new project. I'm going to start a new ActionScript 3 project. Now I'm using a very similar layout as we did before, but this time I've actually got compiler errors in case we have compile problems, but we're still working with our timeline. I'm going to shorten this up a little bit because we don't need so much room. And the first thing I do is add the first layer, and I'm actually going to label my GUI straight away, the GUI. And also I'm going to put my AS3 in straight away. Now, once again, we're always going to start with our GUI. So because I've got the two layers here, I'm going to lock the ActionScript 3 layer, so I can't put any objects on there, so I'll make sure that my actual projects are separate. So in other words, my coding is definitely separate from my GUI, and once I finish with my GUI, I'll lock that layer and unlock the ActionScript 3 layer. So let's set this up. So first of all, I'm going to need actually a text box, and this is going to be my output area. So once again, under properties, I need a dynamic one. I'm using still classic. Give it a name. I'm going to call it txt output. Now also down underneath my control I can have different colours, so if I don't want black I can have blue, etc. But I can also put a box around it so we can actually see it for a change, and make sure you change this to use device fonts. You can do some other little changes in here, but we're not going to worry about that at the moment. So we've got our text box. I just want it to sit more centrally in the middle of our screen. If I want to increase the size of it I can, and that'll allow a larger number to appear if we'd like. So here is my text box in its runtime. When I just quickly run that, oh, we can't see it at the moment, so I must go back into properties, click on that once more, run it again. Now I can see the text box, so this will allow the number to appear in there. Okay, we need an event trigger, so once more I need to create a button. So very quickly I'm going to create a very simple button. So I'm grabbing the button, I'm going in the colours, the black's okay for the outside, I'm going to use red again for my inside. Create a square button right here. Go back to my tools, grab the text tool once more, properties, I'm going to use the grey once again. This is going to be my start button. This is going to start the events that occur. Grab my solid tool, slide that into place. I'm happy for that to be. I really don't want the white background. Use default fonts. Not sure why that's given me a white background. I'm just having a look at the moment. That's because it's dynamic text. We need to go static. There we go. Now we're back in going. Okay, excellent. So I've got my start button. I need to now turn that into a button. Now you notice when I go to modify and I go convert to symbol, I can put its hit square. At the moment I'm putting everything in the middle as a button. That's going to be start btn. Click OK. Notice it's going into the library. So in my library file now you notice there's the button start in there. Okay, so I've created all my objects. Next thing I need to do is actually label them. So I need to come in here, instance name, btn start, and also I need my text box, which is txt output. Excellent. So that's my GUI interface at the moment. It's nothing flash. You can change the background color if you like. You can actually go to modify, document, and you can actually pick a new background color and things like that. But at the moment I'm just going to leave it plain white just for our exercise today. So we're now up to the coding part. So like I said before, we're now going to lock the GUI layer and unlock the ActionScript layer. You can leave them both unlocked, but it depends on what you want to do, because that allows you to get to the properties. So I'm going to copy that. Now I'm going to lock it. And let's go to our ActionScript. Okay, I'm selecting the upper layer, clicking on scene 1, ready to type. So stop is my first command that's in here. You notice the little A's appeared at the top. So the reason why we use timers is timers actually help us do our animation down the track. So, and I sort of look at them like as a for-do loop where they do it for a fixed duration, but they have some better controls and some actual event-driven controls, and that's what we're going to be exploring today. So let's go through and set up our area. So we're going to need things such as our variables. So we also need our functions. We also need our event listeners. Okay, now the first thing I need to do is create an event listener for our start button. So once again, I'm going to paste that in. We need to add an event, so in this case, add event listener. What are we listening for? We're listening for a mouse event. And what type we're listening for a click. And what do we want to do when that clicks? Well, we know we want to start a timer, so I'm going to put F start timer. So it's going to call a function called fStartTimer. So under my functions, I need to declare this now. So up here, I'm going to go function fStartTimer, and once again copy this across. And what are we waiting for? An EVT. What sort of event? I'm actually waiting for a mouse event. And what are we going to do when the mouse event is? We're not resulting anything, so we can void that. And then once we've done that, I'm going to trace once again so that we can actually ensure that this function call is working. I don't want to go any further in my program until I know this is working. Click on Start. In my output window, I can see that. If there isn't an output window, you can actually turn it on underneath your window. So even when I exit out of the program, click on the window, you can actually see in here there's the output window, or F2. So back to my timeline. So we know that's working now and the function call is working. So what we need to look at doing now is actually setting up a timer. So to do that, this is where my start timer is going to be. So I'm just going to move my little trace statement to the top and also rem that out now because I know it's actually working. So timers are much the same as variables, and we have to declare timers. So we can have multiple timers actioning at different times, and each one of those are unique, and so therefore we give them a unique name. So I need to declare a timer. So at the moment I'm going to use var, and then I can actually give it a name. So TMR is short for timer, and then I can give it a name. And so I'm going to call this timer counter because I want the timer just to count upwards, much the same as for do loop, where we go for I equals 1 to 10, you know, trace I, and you see it go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So var timer counter. Now we need to then create it. So what type is it? Well, it's actually of type timer. So it is of itself, and we need to make what's called a new instance of the timer. So it's going to be a new one, and it's going to be a new what? It's going to be a new timer. And in here now we can actually set some things. You notice that in the drop down window you've got timer bracket delay. Now 1000 is equal to 1 second. And then it's got, well, how many times do you want it to delay? So with a comma I can actually then repeat the count. So how many times do I want it to repeat? So if I was doing a for do loop from 1 to 10, I could actually put 10 in there. Okay, so this timer will click every second 10 times. So that seems pretty simple. So we've actually created the timer function. So if I put a comment here, I'll call it an object because that's what it really is. So I've created a timer object. But what do we do with the object once we've got it? Well, you need to actually set up an event listener for the timer. So once again, TMR counter, because that's the name of my timer. I can then add an event listener to this. So we can actually listen for it. And when we talk timers, you'll actually hear me talk about, oh, listen for the click. So at the moment, it'll click every second 10 times. So this event listener is listening for when this goes click, click, click. And when it does click, it can then run off and run a function for us and actually carry out what we need it to do. So what we're listening for is an event listener. What are we listening for? Is a timer event this time, which is a little bit different to a mouse event. So with our mouse event, we're listening for the click. In our timer event, we're actually listening for the timer, which is controlled by these two variables here. So once we listen for our timer, we can get it to do something. So I'm going to run fcounter. So we can actually call a function called fcounter. Now, because this calls a function, we need to write the next function either below or above, because the program's not going to run until we click the start timer. Now, if you have timers calling timers, a timer must be declared before you call the timer. So in other words, if this function had to happen before it could call the one below, and it hadn't read the whole program in the compile time, it won't know what this next function is. So be careful about the stacking order of functions. This can be a real critical thing. So when I click the button here, because the whole program's been read into memory, when I click the button, it knows where each of the functions are. Where if I call a function on a load page that hasn't been declared, or I've actioned it before it's been read, then the computer won't know where that function is. So you may see this in your programs later. So once again, we're going to make a function. So this function is going to be called fcounter. Now, before we pass an event, which was a mouse event, so in this case, we're going to pass an event, but it's going to be a different event this time, because it's going to be a timer event. So we're actually now passing the timer event, where before we actually passed the mouse event. Because a timer is actioning this, we're passing the timer event. So the click gets passed on for us. So once we've sort of passed that on, once again, we can void this, because nothing's going to be returned. And we can open the brace, close the brace. Well, what I want to do, if this is working, then I just want something to appear in this text box. So in txt output, I just want to write something so I know that in essence when I click this button, this function is called, the timer is started, and the timer then calls this. So we're going to just put into the text portion of that, bracket, quote, just put L Marsden. So if all is working, which is not at the moment, we've got a method problem. So let's go have a look at this. So what it's talking here about is the method text through a reference with static type flash. Okay, so obviously I must have something wrong with my GUI. So I'm going to unlock this now. Click on my text box, go to its property. It's set to dynamic, it is classic, use default font. So txt output is okay. So we'll go back into here. I've got like a trace statement where I go trace bracket. What we need to make sure is that it's equal to, and that means we don't need the braces because it's not part of the trace function. So the text output.text is equal to L Marsden. So let's run this again. No errors, no compile errors this time. Click start. Okay, we don't have anything at the moment. That could be because of my font color. So go check. We've got color blue, so that's okay. So we just need to locate why that's not working, or was I too quick? Start. Okay, so nothing's appearing in that frame at the moment. Now, there's a reason why it didn't appear in there. At the moment we click F start timer, comes up here, we declare the timer. When the timer activates and every click it then calls this function. Problem is we haven't started our timer. So I'm going to put in here event listener. And then what I want to do in this function is I actually want to start the timer, because there's no trigger to start our timer. Now, like I said before with the stacking order, we need to actually make sure it's declared before we start the timer. Now, when I click the button, the time is declared, the event listener is activated, and then I start the timer, which means it starts clicking. On the click, it then runs this function. Let's go see if this works. There it is. So now that is started and it's going into there. So let's see if we can make it look a little more interesting. Now I want it to count up. So what I'm going to do is declare a variable, but I'm going to declare a global variable, and I'm going to have var encounter, and it's going to be type number. I'm going to set encounter to equal 0. Now when this increment, when it comes here, I actually want to then show encounter. So we need to turn it to a string because it needs to be text property. So it's set to 0, it comes in here and then places 0 into our box. So I don't want to go too far, I just want to see that happen. 0 appears, excellent. Now I want that to increment. So to get that to increment, every time this function here is called, I want to increment encounter. So I can go encounter plus plus. This will add 1 to encounter. So the plus plus adds 1 to encounter. Now because that's incremented by 1, first time through it's 0, it then adds 1 to it, and so then when it outputs we should see 1 appearing in the box. Click start. Now at the moment it should stop at 8. Nope, it didn't stop at 8, it's gone through to 10. The reason why it went through to 10 is because we've got 10 set here. At the moment it's going really slow, it's 1 second. So I'm going to speed that up. It's going to be a lot quicker now. So when I click start, and it stops at 10. So this counter goes 10 times, it will call this function 10 times with that duration of space. So if I wanted to make it infinite, I could just remove this and then it will just create every 100th of the second or every 10th of the second. It actually goes through and increments that and keeps going on forever, which is a good thing because now we can actually look at doing some other things for our program. So we can see now that this is the basic structure of a timer. If we wanted to, we can use the timer to move things across the stage. So every time it goes click, we can increment an object to move it in our animation, or we can roll a dice again, or we could do all sorts of things. So it's a way of having an event-driven loop. So let's have a look at something else we can do. At the moment, we've got a timer to actually start the clock, but let's also put a button on there to stop the clock. Now to do this we're going to use the same sort of start button, but we're going to go into our library, and if you wanted to you can go up to the top here and you see library, which is Command L. So what we want to do is we want to duplicate this, so right mouse click, duplicate. We can give it a new name. Now I want a stop button, so I'm going to change my start button to stop, and it's still going to be BTN. Now it's still a button, it's still in my library, but now I've got a stop button. It looks the same as a start button. So what I'm going to do is double click this now, and I've actually gone inside scene 1 inside the stop button. I can then go into my tools, grab the text tool, just click in the text, and I can change that to stop. But mind you, there's an over and down state I need to change as well. So at the moment we've got the up, we should have had all the states there. So I'll just go out of that at the moment and go back up to scene 1. I'll just click save here at the moment. I don't know what it's up to. Let's call it timers. I just closed it, sorry. Open recent timers. Okay, so we're back to where we were. This should be a copy of the stop button. I'll drag that out and put it on the stage. I will then just move that into position. I'm just going to double click this because I should have had the up over down and it hasn't given that to me, so that's okay. We can easily then just go F6, 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 and we can do the normal sort of changes. So we go Command T, slide that up to 110, thereabouts. The down, Command T once more, slide that down to roughly 90. Okay, and that's made our button. So our stop button now should act the same as our start button. Our start button we never animated, that's the reason why we don't have it. Okay, so if we want to animate the stop button as well, we can easily go back out to our main timeline, double click this, once again function F6, 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 once again over, Command T, slide up to roughly 110, sorry, and then now down, Command T, back down to 90-ish. Now when I run it, I should now have start, and now we've got a stop button, but it doesn't work because there's no instance name, etc. So let's get that done quickly. Click on scene 1, click on the stop button, properties, BTN stop. Now BTN stop is going to share the same properties as our BTN start. So once again, I'm going to copy this and paste this, change that to stop, and also change this to stop timer. And now what I need to do is create a function called stop timer. So what I'm going to do is copy the start timer and paste this down below. And I'm going to change this to stop. And I just need to change some things. I don't need to declare the timer, and I don't have a function call for it. And to stop the timer, all we have to do is change start to stop. So this method, so a timer has a start and it has a stop method. So this function call now should stop the timer if the timer is running. So let's run the program and see what occurs. We've actually got an error straight away. So we need to go through and have a look at why we've got this error. It's saying that it doesn't know what TMR counter.stop is. Now the reason for this, the variable is actually declared inside of fStartTimer. So this function can't see that variable because this variable is actually local to this function. And it's trying to talk to a method of a object that is sort of blocked off. So if we actually take this variable declaration now and move this up into our global variables up the top of the page, now when we run it we should lose that error, which we've done. So now I should be able to start and I should be able to stop. Okay, let's have a look at some other things we can do. Now we said before that event listeners can actually be declared down all in our one area. So I'm going to take this event listener out now and place this right down the bottom here. And I could actually have my button clicks and then my event, my timers underneath. But you can stack them however you like. I'm going to put my timers at the top and my buttons underneath. That way the timers are read before the buttons are actually executed. And that means I can close up this little gap here. So let's have a look at this one. We can hit start, we can hit stop. Now there are some other commands. If I wanted to actually restart this timer, I can actually go in there and there is a command called restart or reset. So if we were doing it for 8 times and we got 4 times through, we can actually reset that back to 0. But if I wanted this to stop, I could actually take encounter, set that back to 0, and then my program will then count from 0 again. So with my start, click stop, click start, it goes back to 0. So this is how we can use a timer. And I hope you've actually learned some different things. You can look at more methods about timers and how to use them. We can have timers calling timers. We can actually have a timer when one timer stops, or when the timer ends, we can start another timer. So there's different timer functions, and this is the basic structure that you need to understand to work with timers.